and not stop that.
Standing.
You can hear?
We can hear you. Larry, we good on sound?
Sounds good. You're recording 5 by 5. Everybody's great.
All right, excellent. Let's just jump right in and reward everybody who got here right on time. So thank you all very much for joining us. I'm Michelle Cades. I'm the president of Fairfax County SEPTA. And our guests tonight are Superintendent Scott Brabrand and Assistant Superintendent Teresa Johnson. You may also hear Larry Mills in the background. He's from FCPTA, and he's helping us with the technical side of things tonight. And also waiting in the wings is Amanda Campbell, our SEPTA communications chair, and now our vice president-elect. So thank you so much, Dr. Brabrand and Ms. Johnson, and also to Julie Clinch, our ASL interpreter. Thanks to FCPS for providing Julie's services tonight. And thank you again, FCPTA and Larry, for your help with all the technical support and getting us onto this platform. For those who aren't familiar or that familiar with SEPTA, Fairfax County SEPTA is a county-wide PTA with the mission of empowering and connecting families, students, and educators to ensure that students with disabilities develop their full potential as individuals and community members. So if you're not a member and you would like to join, please go to our website, www.fairfaxcountysepta.org. And we're also striving to have liaisons to the PTAs in every school. And we'll be having openings on our board for the upcoming year. So we welcome anyone who's interested to please get more involved with our organization. Questions for tonight's event were taken ahead of time, and we're going to try to get through as many topics as we can. So while we won't have time to answer any additional questions from the chat feature here, we can take any questions submitted and pass them along to the school system. Also, we had a lot of questions on return to learn, but because we had so many other questions, we're not going to focus on return to learn tonight. And instead, we're going to focus more directly on what's going on right now. We would love the opportunity to have another session where we can focus more directly on return to learn. So hopefully we'll be able to arrange that in the future. In looking at the categories of questions that we received from you all, the top one, actually almost a third of the questions, was about the temporary learning plans. So we anticipate spending a significant amount of time on that subject this evening. Another area of significant concern has to do with inconsistencies. Major problems with inconsistencies are not new to FCPS, but they're even more exaggerated right now. For instance, something that we've discussed, Dr. Brabrand and Ms. Johnson, with you in the past is that inequities occur when program choices and trainings are at the discretion of individual administrators instead of being driven from the experts in the Department of Special Services. And now during distance learning, many parents and staff have reported more inconsistencies both between and within schools, which really leaves people feeling really frustrated and upset. So for example, we've heard from parents who have said they haven't heard from their student's case manager. We have self-contained students who are receiving significantly less or even no synchronous session opportunities compared to their gen ed peers. We have some middle schools that are offering synchronous special ed electives and others are not. And we have secondary school staff, for example, who aren't getting explicit guidelines on what criteria to use when they're looking at bumping up grades. So let's dive into some of these areas and hopefully clear up some of the confusion and the frustration so that we can move forward. So let's start. Is it an expectation that special education students will be receiving direct instruction of new material, as is the expectation for general education students?
So Michelle, we absolutely are having the same expectations for our general ed and our special education kids. We are working to try to cover essential standards for fourth quarter. As you know, the governor closed school, and there was some state guidance to do, you had the option to do no work or cover no new standards. We thought we needed to find essential standards to really help kids to be prepared for next year. Everybody is going to move forward, and how do we help our kids have a chance to understand essential standards here from the fourth quarter and prepare? So we tried to do something, even though some of the guidance could have been not to do anything at all. I realized that was its own burn, right? We were given guidance not to grade fourth quarter, and so we came out with a grading policy that was really while a no mark for fourth quarter, we did want to give kids in some incentive to try to, engage in learning. Of course, we want them to love learning for the sake of learning, but we know how grades matter, and that they would have time to finish their third quarter grading, which is just wrapped up here at the end of April. But even a chance to be able to have a little bit of ability to impact their final grade. So it was a balancing act. I know not everybody likes that approach. Some people wanted the pass-fail that some other districts did. To be honest, we looked at pass-fail. We didn't think that was going to be as fair to kids. Some who had already made very high grades. A pass grade for our high school athletes is interpreted by the NCAA as a D, and we didn't want to do that to our kids.
Sure.
So we tried to come up with what we thought was the best way forward.
So just to be sure I'm hearing correctly, then the expectation is that all of our students should be receiving direct instruction and new material.
We're covering essential standards, which is going to have some new material. Yes.
Great.
Are we going to cover all of fourth quarter? No. I mean, I'm just being honest, and that's
for everybody.
That's part of why we're here tonight. Is we want to be partners with you. I mean, I know many of you. Happy Cinco de Mayo. I just had a 10-minute meal with my family to enjoy it. I hope you all get to celebrate Cinco de Mayo if that's something important for your cultural heritage, or just to celebrate, which we need to do even in difficult times. And one little quick thing in the beginning here: return to learn. We're going to have a school board meeting on Monday. I shared earlier to all FCPS earlier this week for Teacher Appreciation Week. I mentioned that we're going to talk about return to learn. We're working closely with the state and the governor. Again, the governor came out yesterday, and we'll be sharing some of our best thinking to inform the summer as well as the fall, along with what we think the state is going to be providing in additional guidance on Monday with the school board. But glad to be here tonight to talk special education.
Outstanding. So to start right off, it's wonderfully reassuring to hear that our special ed students are going to be receiving direct instruction, because we have been hearing from parents who have been told that that's not the case. What is the expectation for special ed support for students who are receiving instruction in gen ed classes?
I'm going to let Teresa, Ms. Johnson, share some on that.
Sure.
Sure, and I just want to back up to one thing on the last question, Michelle. All case managers should have reached out to families at this point. And so I would like to say, if that has not happened, then the first contact should be the principal. And if that is not successful, reaching out to the procedural support liaison or to the region offices so that we can address those inconsistencies. Regarding your question about general ed classes, special ed teachers are collaborating with their general ed teachers in order to help design learning activities that are accessible for our students with disabilities and to meet the needs of all the learners in our distance learning environment. Again, the expectation is case managers should be connecting with individual students and the families to support the learning and to ensure that these learning opportunities are accessible for all students. Office hours were specifically built into the distance learning plans to help support this outreach as well. So yes, the expectation is there should be continued collaboration, just like there would have been during school when our schools were open.
So for instance, then if a student was in a team taught class, is the expectation that the special ed teacher would be dropping into the synchronous learning instruction?
Yes, they could look at that. The expectation is that they're continuing to do that collaboration, meeting with those classes and touching base with those students.
Okay, got it. What is the expectation for special ed electives in middle school? So for example, strategies for success or reading classes that are technically an elective, but are really where some kids are getting their special education.
Right, Dr. Brabrand and I have talked about this a little bit and what our plan currently looks like. So for high school, I think people are aware, I hope the community is aware that high school electives, they should be meeting with their students on the expected schedule. Middle school is different, and that the expectation was not that middle school electives, the special ed electives, would continue to meet in a synchronous environment. I have been hearing that there are some teachers that are continuing to meet with their students in a synchronous environment, so it is important to hear. But the expectation was for those classes that aren't meeting, that those teachers and those services may be provided. Again, what's feasible and what's discussed through the temporary learning plan and the distance environment to address any other goals. So that may look like the case manager or the teacher reaching out to the parent and connecting with the student in a different way. That was the expectation for middle school. Dr. Brabrand might want to add to that.
I would say, Michelle, overall theme, this is an unexpected event that none of us could have imagined. We've learned a lot in the last month. We're not going to be rid of the virus in the fall, probably. I mean, unless a miracle happens. That doesn't mean we're going to do everything we've done in fourth quarter right now, like we're going to do in the fall. We've got lessons learned. Honestly, as I look back on it, we should have done the same thing in middle school as we did in high school, or better said the other way. We should have done the same thing. Our approach at middle school should have been the same approach at high school. We did it differently at each level. You know, we did. Would it have been better probably to have done it the way the high schools did it? Yes. And that's feedback that we're using and you all have given us. You know, there's a question later about teachers working 18 hours. It is Teacher and Staff Appreciation Week, so I do want to do a shout out. We have amazing folks. We're a big system, and sometimes it's a game of telephone where the message, where it starts and how does it get down to the individual classroom. But I believe in almost every FCPS teacher's heart, especially special education teachers. They want to serve the kids. They're trying their best. They've got things they're trying to balance at home. But we know that there's things that we're learning now about how we need to set up shop to support special education kids if we have distance learning in some form in the fall, that we're going to do differently, that we're not going to just do the same and say, well, this is as good as it's going to be. I think we've done a lot of our special education services better than some folks, even folks around us. But that doesn't mean, you know, we're Fairfax County Public Schools. We're a beacon for families who have special needs kids to come to get the best services in the country and the world. And so that's a high bar. And we've learned things now that can help us do a better job in the fall. And we'll use these lessons to help inform what we do in the fall.
I'm glad to hear that. It's very important to our parents, particularly those who have middle schoolers who are not getting those services right now. For a lot of our kids, that's the grounding class for them in terms of being able to be successful in their core classes. So I hope that it's possible to encourage teachers in middle school to be able to jump in and start to offer some of those times. But I'm definitely glad to hear that there's potentially going to be shifts for the fall, if unfortunately we're in this type of situation in the fall as well. Jumping into the question then of related services such as speech, OT, PT, counseling, ABA, ATS, adapted PE, I could go on. Is it possible then for those services to be set up through a one-to-one telehealth setup? And if so, when? What are the plans for related services also that are in small groups, like when kids have goals on social skills? Obviously, that's a lot harder to do when we're in our respective homes.
I'm going to let Teresa start with that one. Teresa, you want to start, and maybe I can add in some comments.
Right. So during distance learning, special education may include small group instruction as well as one-to-one instructional time. And as case managers should be having those conversations. Related services will be provided and the support necessary for students to access their participation in the distance learning environment. So the services will range from teacher and team supports and from real time to the multimedia interaction with the families and students. And the related and additional service providers should be working with the case managers and families to determine what services are necessary to support the access, again, to the general ed curriculum and how that participation, what does that look like from the home environment? They should also, the related service providers should also be joining classrooms and integrating their services within the classroom setting. Small group, individuals, synchronous classroom instruction may also be included to address social skills goals. So these resources, we've created resources and recordings that are available on the DSS intranet site for schools. If they need additional supports, the support, again, could be synchronous or it could be asynchronous, and these decisions should be discussed with the families and what family needs, and outline that in the temporary learning plan. we absolutely acknowledge the challenges our related service providers are having during this distance learning right now. Some of them, and some of you know this, some of these related service providers have caseloads up to 50 students or more, and time alone has made this very difficult for us. So what about the loss of services? That was one of the questions that we had talked about. You know, students are going to have to be evaluated when we return to school to determine what additional or remedial supports are going to need to be provided to individual students.
So let me back up just to make sure that I got it straight. In talking about related services like speech or, you know, OT, PT, whatever have you, should those service providers be reaching out to parents and doing their best to be arranging, for example, to give the kids speech via one-to-one? I thought I heard more that they're just supposed to be consulting with the classroom teachers.
No,
I'm sorry, could you just clarify that?
Some of these services are much more challenging to conduct at home. Clearly, your physical therapist is going to have a much harder time providing a service between home and school. So some of that is really what's the feasibility of the service that could be provided. But the speech should absolutely be reaching out to families to determine who might need individual one-to-one support during this time, or who could receive the services during small group instruction, or does that need to be a consultative process? So all of that is a viable option within the distance learning setting, depending on the individual needs of kids.
So great. I'm glad to hear then that it is certainly possible for it to be happening. It sounds like it should. We know that a lot of private practices are being able to set up one-to-one telehealth appointments, but we do have parents who are being told that they aren't going to be offered synchronous learning. So I appreciate you clarifying that. And in sort of reflecting back on all of these questions I've asked so far, because there's been so much confusion, would it be possible for you to post explicit expectations that are given to staff so that everybody knows what to expect? We hear from parents that school administrators say one thing and teachers hear something else and parents hear something else. Can you publicly post some of these expectations for us to be able to all be on the same page?
So I think that's something we can go back and take a look at. You know, her staff did very extensive training, sharing expectations with staff. And, you know, we need to figure out how do we take the best of that and make sure it's clear to the public and to our staff. So I'll take that idea back. What I'd really say, though, to a lot of folks is in a system with 200 schools, if you're having an individual issue and you've worked with the teacher, which is where I would encourage every family to go first, then reach out to the principal, give that principal an opportunity to address expectations. You know, they're doing virtual faculty meetings for the first time. When I was a principal, I could just walk into the choral room at Fairfax High and I could tell who was paying attention and who wasn't. It's a little harder in a virtual world. And maybe it wasn't even paying attention, but just missed hearing an essential item. So giving our principals a chance to address it. And then really, if it's still an issue at the school, going to our region assistant superintendents. And we have 5 regions. And then if there are a few parents who just feel, look, my interactions with the administration have not been positive, we have the special education ombudsman that we started new this year as an addition to our ombudsman office. And I would encourage them to reach out there. I think a lot of these, we can figure out how to better communicate the expectations to parents too. But I also think we've communicated expectations pretty well. And sometimes we just need clarifying conversations that can happen at a school level or a regional level to take care of it.
I think that the more that we can set those expectations up sort of for everybody to see, then that will really help with parents being able to partner with our school staff. I think that there are sometimes parents who don't know what they're missing or maybe aren't necessarily comfortable speaking up and asking, and just are, as we all should be, at least at minimum, appreciative of what they're receiving. But then there are a lot of parents who don't know or aren't aware that they can be asking for more that their kid might need.
Okay.
Let me jump into a few questions about instruction. How do students access specific learning disability intervention programs that are computerized or are usually given direct in small group or one-on-one instruction? Is the county working to get students and parents access to computer programs through licensing agreements or other distance learning arrangements?
Teresa, do you want to start?
Yes, absolutely. So, in accordance with the distance learning plans and students' temporary learning plans, and our ability to use certain aspects of programs, it is expected that instruction using these research-based programs will look different, obviously, than it does in face-to-face instruction. The research-based programs are supplemental to the core instruction, and decisions regarding their continued use in distance learning need to take into consideration the amount of time that students are available for the intervention during distance learning, and also the fidelity of the implementation of many of the programs that are not designed by the publisher to be delivered solely in an online setting. A number of the publishers have not given FCPS permission to utilize all the components of their intervention programs through the distance learning model, and that's been a challenge for us. It prevented us from accessing and sharing certain program materials with dignity. Other publishers have been wonderful and waived copyright permissions and have allowed greater access to the program materials. So if there are questions regarding how the intervention program will look for individual students and the case manager doesn't have an answer, then we have special services staff that are certainly available to speak to staff and parents. And our curriculum resource teachers or our behavior intervention teachers or our special ed teachers in our Office of School Support on our regional teams have been working directly with teachers to answer their questions about specific programs that are available. Again, because it's been limited based on what some of the publishers will allow us to do. So I certainly encourage if parents are not getting answers from their school-based staff to reach out, and we're happy to work individually or have our staff from Department of Special Services work directly with the schools to figure out what's feasible.
Got it. Well, I mean, of course, that's certainly a shame that some of the publishers aren't willing to be so flexible with our system, especially now when so many different groups are making access to what's usually, behind paywalls for free. But I'm glad to hear that some of them are, and I'm hopeful that kids will be able to access those services on their computers at home.
Michelle, if I could add, that is the nugget. We're pushing to get as much access to those programs as we can. We have had our legal folks really trying to work very hard to open it up to more. And so that's an example where it's not on our end that we're not, but yes, to parents, to the end user, to students. It feels, why is someone getting this program, but I can't get mine? So this is one of those challenges in COVID-19. And we all want to be mutually accountable to get our kids educated, especially right now during this time. We're worried for our kids. I'm worried. I'm a parent too, worried for my kids going through this. And how do we try to continue to build that mutual accountability? And we're going to continue to push companies to give us access so we can provide as best we can in distance learning some of these needed services that some of their software really could provide for kids that work.
Terrific. I'm really glad to hear that. Excellent. The Gen Ed classes are being recorded, the synchronized classes. Will special ed classes be recorded for students to review if for some reason they can't get on during the synchronous time?
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit about this, and Dr. Brabrand may want to jump in. Special ed teachers all have the ability and the option of recording their classes for students and for parents to have access if they can't participate during the synchronous learning time. Many teachers are providing additional asynchronous learning activities for students to access that do take into account the different developmental considerations regarding screen time or attention span. But similar to general ed teachers, special ed teachers do have the ability, and that decision has been left up to individual teachers. And I will tell you from experience, my own daughter is a high school teacher and said that she has forgotten. So I do think there's some technology that we need to continue to remind teachers because not all of our students have been able to access the synchronous learning for whatever reason. meet very different family circumstances. So that is something I think that we are encouraging.
So like the example that you mentioned with your daughter that she's sometimes forgotten, that implies that she's supposed to be recording it in that case. Are the special ed teachers supposed to be recording in the same way?
I'm gonna ask Dr. Brabrand. I can't recall in all the instructions whether they were given the option. I thought they were given the option of recording, but I would have to go back and research that unless Dr. Brabrand recalls.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I guess I want to make sure I understand. I hear you saying parents would love for those sessions to be recorded if at all possible. Is that the point?
Sure. In the same way that the gen ed classes are recorded so that if a child misses it, they can go back and listen to it later or view it later.
And I'm just being completely transparent. Have we said that every gen ed class is being recorded in Fairfax County? Teresa, do you know? Is that true?
I don't. I'd have to go back and research that or ask Dr. Presidio.
Yeah, when we presented to the
pretty sure just
board,
from listening in on the sessions, you know, when we were first rolling out the program, that the plan was that things were going to be recorded so that if families' schedules didn't allow for kids to be on at that time, they'd be able to go back and listen later.
I will certainly go back and review that. And that's something that to me is a small tweak. If we've said one thing to one group and something different to another, that we could go back and look at it. It seems to me as simple as hitting a button, right, before you get started.
Exactly. Exactly. That would be.
I'm all learning technology, but I will follow up on that issue of recording. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm glad I'm not the one trying to remember how to record it because I can barely keep going on this.
Is this being recorded? Is this being recorded?
This is recording.
Okay.
I'm going to move on to timelines and assessments. Given that the Federal Department of Education is not pursuing waivers for IEP timelines, how are testings, observations, and other assessments, including MSRT, which is the Medical Services Review Team, how are those being completed? So also going along with that, for rising kindergartners or other new enrollees moving in, how will their most appropriate placement be determined?
So at this time, FCPS is not conducting face-to-face evaluations until schools reopen. But I will tell you that we are in conversations and consideration if there are virtual options for evaluations of students. So that is something we continue to explore as a possibility, especially if we continue to have concerns into the fall with COVID-19 and school closures. You know, it has been acknowledged that student performance while in the home and the distance learning model is very different than their performance in a structured school setting. And regarding MSRT, due to the health department, the Fairfax County Health Department reassigning all their school nurses to county nursing tasks, MSRT is not convening until school resumes again. And school teams will definitely, regarding your kindergarten question, school teams will need to review all available information to determine the best services for the students with disabilities in the coming school year. You know, honestly, we're just in unprecedented times, and we're going to have to call for some flexibility and use best judgment and information from all sources in order to make decisions about services for next year.
Okay. Along the lines of assessment, what type of data collection or documentation is being kept by our special educators during remote learning in order to measure kids' gains and losses?
So special education teachers were advised to keep documentation about the services that they're delivering and any anecdotal progress for students or any work materials that they're seeing from students. The packets have definitely created a different challenge for us than getting information back to case managers. There's going to have to be some collaboration between parents and families to discuss the resources and the work samples. Resources such as the distance learning plan documentation log that's located in Blackboard. This resource was developed to help the teachers really assist them in keeping track of the student academic progress, as well as the IEP goals outlined in the temporary learning plan. Teachers are also documenting students who are participating in synchronous and ensuring that there's follow-up if they don't see students participating, whether that be in synchronous or asynchronous. So the expectation is that there is a follow-up to determine, and I'm hearing a lot of that is happening, follow-up on why a student might not be, what are the barriers and how can we overcome the barriers to ensure that.
Okay. And I'm glad to hear then that the teachers are doing their best. Obviously, the circumstances and the ability to collect data is radically different, but I'm glad that they are still keeping track of that. And also that teachers are willing to be making accommodations. And we'll talk about accommodations a little bit later, hopefully.
Okay.
But I'm glad to
Michelle,
hear that.
can I ask you a question? I wanted to really make sure that we address the concern that you brought to our attention about the confidentiality agreement. And so
Yes.
I want to provide some clarification of that. Is that okay if I just back up for 1 second?
Absolutely, yes. We were wondering about the confidentiality agreements that some special ed families are being asked to sign, but gen ed are not. If you could touch on that, that would be wonderful. Thanks.
Sure. So everybody should have received in my newsletter last week, our DSS newsletter, that there was a confidentiality notice that was developed for parents and guardians related to the use of Blackboard, Collaborate, and Google Meet as online platforms that are being used by FCPS for our distance learning. This notice does include information related to the disclosure of a student's personally identifiable information and guidelines and expectations to ensure that the confidentiality rights of our students are protected when live video sessions are used. But I just wanted to clarify that parents are not being asked to sign that confidentiality notice. That was just a notification that your student may be in a small group setting and that his or her name may be on Blackboard, full name may be posted on Blackboard. Now, what parents are being asked to sign is the consent form related to related services because of the last licensing requirements for teletherapy. This is related to HIPAA laws. When a physical therapist or an occupational therapist, a speech language pathologist, or school social works in a real-time multimedia format, parental consent must be obtained for these services to occur in that manner in compliance with the law and/or the licensing required for their particular licensing. So this would include video interaction with students and families, and also special ed meetings or reevaluation or eligibility meetings. So I just wanted to clarify that point. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about that.
Absolutely. And I think that
I just wanted, just the last piece of that, the school psychologists have to also obtain the parental consent to provide the telehealth services. While HIPAA is loosening up a little bit, they still have licensing requirements to follow. So thanks for letting me just touch on that briefly.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that since so many of us have or currently have been seeking private services and we constantly are signing those HIPAA forms, that clarification hopefully should ring very familiar to many of us. There's a question that I was hoping to get to at the end, but it's sort of related, so I want to just jump to it now. There's another form, and I'm going to skip ahead here and then hopefully not lose my place here, on the informed consent for using multimedia, where it says that I understand that I'm responsible for the cost of technology associated with receiving OTPT speech therapy through virtual visits. So for example, data or internet plans and personal devices. Can you speak to that and how that works under FAPE? Because I know that we had the confusion with the computer laptop fees and those being covered under accommodations and then, you know, FAPE and so forth. Could you comment on that piece?
Sure. So the distance learning plan for students is intended to communicate, as we've talked about, the FCPS approach to providing ongoing services and supports to our students while we're in this emergency closure. It is acknowledged, and we've been very upfront that the distance learning environment is no substitute and cannot be a substitute for the in-person instructional programs. And our guidance coming out of the state and the federal guidance was really, while there's no identified method or detailed guidance about how to meet the needs of all the students during the closure, the guidance does state that schools need to be flexible and consider, a variety of delivery options that are reasonable to provide services to our students. So what constitutes FAPE is necessarily different. It's going to look different in light of the circumstances of the pandemic and the closure of all of our schools. And we are doing our best to provide FAPE within the constraints of the distance learning environment. All students in FCPS are using the family's at-home internet provider to access both synchronous and asynchronous learning, unless they have the availability or they've been able to pick up a MiFi from the school-provided MiFi that can actually meet the needs of 5 different devices in the house. So, we are working to try to support our students. I see Dr. Brabrand wants to weigh in here.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the school system has done an amazing job at getting the technology and the MiFis out to families, and that's been incredibly admirable. It was quite an undertaking. Was there something more, Dr. Brabrand, you wanted to add to that? And then we'll jump into the temporary learning plans.
I just want to say, I think we've been trying to do everything that we can to address the issue of technology and access to technology to our families. And have we been able to do it everywhere? Can I say that with 100% confidence? No. I can tell you though, we spent 2 or 3 weeks distributing. We've distributed over 17,000 laptops. I think over 1,000 MiFis. We're trying, and we're ordering more, and we're looking at additional laptop distribution for our earlier grades, that K2 area that, folks have said, gosh, can we have something for them? I've got kids with special needs. I don't have access to technology.
Yep.
So those are some things, even as we pivot to the fall, how can we have access to every kid for technology, and thinking about how that looks even in the home too. So those are things we're looking at for the fall that we just didn't have as fully fleshed out in a short period of time for something we didn't expect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's great to hear. It's like the first we've heard of that about the younger students. So that's wonderful to hear also. Let's go back to the temporary learning plans, because as I mentioned initially, we do have a lot of questions about the TLPs. The American Association of School Administrators had shared on their FAQ on their website by Thompson and Horton that changes in services should still be documented through an IEP and prior written notice. And I think, Teresa, you were starting to get to some of this a few moments ago. That the U.S. Department of Education has not been endorsing having districts create a separate document to track changes in services. And so FCPS did go in the opposite direction with these temporary learning plans. And that seems to be really without explicit statutory direction or regulatory basis for asking parents to rely on this document for the provision of their special ed and related services. So many parents have been questioning the legality of the temporary learning plans. We've heard that question on a daily basis. And so we're wondering why FCPS has chosen to use the temporary learning plan instead of doing IEP addendums or even addendums without a meeting.
So let me start, and then I'm going to let Teresa share her part. And again, part of why I'm here tonight and Teresa is trying to develop a narrative that's partnership. When this thing hit, I mean, we didn't see it coming. We didn't see school closure coming. I mean, one day we were in school. If you want to, just reminding everybody, I actually shared a message out about we're going to stay open. Here's the health department guidelines, and the community spoke and said, you know what? There's a tipping point, and we're not comfortable with our kids in school. And so we closed that Friday, and then we had a teacher diagnosed on Saturday that we shared with the community late in the evening, and we closed Monday. We never opened again. The governor closed. So even legally, we were all running around at the beginning trying to figure out the best way. And I would just say to all of you who are watching and all the folks in the special ed community, this is in my heart. My kids had an IEP in Fairfax, the TLP, which some other districts did, we were just trying to do the best of what we thought we could do to honor FAPE, but know that I don't know any school district that's being honest with parents in this country that can say that is closed, that they're able to do FAPE in its full realization for every kid's IEP. I don't. I just don't. So I think the TLP for us was trying to go, let's do something. Let's not sit and do nothing. Let's try to do some new learning instead of just saying, no, we're not going to do anything, sit around for 3 months. So I think for us, yes, some other people finally have weighed in and said no, and Secretary DeVos just last week shared her interpretation, which is that no flexibility is needed. But we had to make a decision really within 2 weeks when we presented to the board, and we just thought this way would be the quickest way to do the most. Not everybody feels that way, so I have to respect that. And if you don't want to sign it, don't sign it. If you want to follow through with the IEP process, we'll allow it. But I think part of the narrative I want to change is it wasn't trying to take away people's IEP that they worked hard to develop with teachers or to suddenly find out a way to do less for kids. It was trying to do the best for kids. And it's hard if you already feel, I went to your, you all were so wonderful last year. And I think it was you all and ACSD, we had the joint meeting with parents. If your narrative has not been positive with FCPS, you see the TLP is one more thing. I mean, that's how I feel. It's, here they go again. Another narrative is in a time that no one really was, the day after this happened, providing direction, we knew we had to do something, and we wanted to do something as quick as possible. Now, look, I'm the first to say, did we have lessons learned in a system this big of doing things as quickly as we had wanted? We've learned a lot. I've learned a lot as a leader. But the TLP was about trying to do the best we could do as quickly as we could do. And I don't want any parent feeling like that. If they feel strongly that that's not how they feel about it, then we need to try to do everything we can to honor the IEP. But I just want to say one last part. I honestly don't believe there is any school superintendent in this country who is under school closure doing distance learning who can say I can meet every obligation of every IEP. I don't believe it. I'd love to say it because it would be nice and it would sound good, but I just don't think it's true. And so that's that little bit of grace that I think we have to extend to each other. And I'm not talking about going from everything to nothing. And if you're having experience of that, that is where you need to follow up with your PSL and your principal and go, come on now, let's find what that middle ground is. We need to be doing the best that we can do for these kids. And that's what we were trying to do with TLP. But that's something I'm going to review. I want to hear from you and more parents. It was not the intention to be anything other than a partner and trying to help your kids. And I realize that for some, it's a narrative that, well, legally something's going on here and it doesn't seem right. And it wasn't that intention. And I apologize if it was felt that way.
I very much appreciate hearing you say that, because I think that parents are rightfully very hypersensitive, as you said, for these IEPs that they've come a long road on with developing. So I think what I would really encourage for you to think about is how can the amount of work for parents and staff be reduced in the process, so that if a parent says, I'm not comfortable signing the TLP, it would be worth some thought as to how to eliminate the onus on the parent to then have to be having more conversations with the department head and another conversation with the PSL. And is there a way of simplifying the number of steps to take? And you may not have an answer to that right now.
No, I just wanted to follow up on additionally what Dr. Brabrand said. So we did have quite a bit of consultation because the Virginia Department of Education really advised school systems to develop plans that meet their own needs during the time of emergency. We did have lots of conversation with legal counsel about this, and there are a lot of different groups saying different things out there, depending on who you're listening to. Dr. Brabrand and I did a national consortium conversation together with, I don't know, maybe how many, 16 school systems across the nation, something like that. So, the plan, the recommendation was that we really, as Dr. Brabrand said, looked at this a way to try to most effectively and expeditiously meet the needs of our system to gather parent input. This is unlike what other divisions around us and across the state have done, to really look at what's the feasibility of what we can do quickly while we're trying to put this in place. It's very hard to build a school system, an entire digital school system online within a few weeks.
Yes.
Quite a bit of effort. So what I do want to be clear about is the TLP is not an IEP, and that it is not a waiver of rights under IDEA. While some of the language about it's not currently allowed under IDEA, no question it is not recognized under IDEA, and these are just the times that we're in right now. And your child's IEP will be implemented as soon as school is opened again. And we talked about this, we're not offering instruction in the same way or for the same amount of time that we do during the school year. It's just not feasible for us to do it. The plan, we did talk about having a parent signature. We thought it was important to document that parent input and parent agreement to what those goals are. And again, as Dr. Brabrand said, it's not a legal document. We're not required to have a parent signature because you're not waiving any of your legal rights under IDEA. So I think that the question about how can we eliminate some of the bureaucracy piece of it in the conversation around that, I think that's challenging because we want to meet and try to resolve whatever the concerns are. So hopefully that provides a little more clarity. And also, I know we talked about this a little bit, but this doesn't deny any right to any kind of future services or claims.
Including compensatory services?
There are other ways for families to navigate that resolution process.
Okay, and so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. This also, signing a TLP, will it or will it not deny a child the right to compensatory services if need be?
It will not.
Okay, that's a question that we have been getting a lot, so thank you for clarifying that one. I have a quick question on return to learn planning. Again, I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that subject because we could do that for an hour straight. But how will special education stakeholders, including parents, staff, and organizations like SEPTA, but also, as you mentioned, the ACSD or POAC, just to name a few, how will those other community groups be included in the return to learn planning process?
So one of the things, Michelle, we've tried to reach out informally as we've had work groups in our system starting to develop preliminary plans. And one of the things I want to re-emphasize, we're going to bring our best thinking on Monday. And our best thinking on Monday just got informed by the governor's thinking yesterday. So we have to just realize that what I share with you on Monday in the community and we start to talk about could change. And I think where the governor is, honestly, is he's trying to use the state health department, the epidemiologists, to look at what is their data saying, their hospitalizations, their positive test cases, and can we ramp up testing? He's proposed a phase plan. I want to see how that phase plan looks for education, so that helps inform what we're going to do here. And one of the things the governor said yesterday I thought was very interesting and very important for folks here to know. He really wants it to be a one Virginia approach, as opposed to, in a sense, each region of Virginia or each school district. I'm going to be reaching out to my colleagues tomorrow in Northern Virginia superintendents to talk a little bit more before I bring my thinking forward. I know some superintendents have already brought their thinking forward, but the truth is, if we're being honest, no one has the completely definitive plan. But what our parents want now is what are you thinking, and then to be able to react. And so we're going to engage you after Monday. We can figure out whether it's a forum like this, sending out an email to parents with the key information, potentially a survey. But even in surveys, right, because we've had different groups doing surveys, you have to be careful what you're surveying and how it's presented.
Absolutely.
And one of the things in Fairfax, are we hearing everybody's voice?
And that's our question. Yes.
SEPTA is part of folks who felt like their voice wasn't being heard and it needed to be stood up. And we still have some groups in our community that don't feel their voice is heard equally, or maybe sometimes even at all. So we're going to start to bring our very, very beginning thinking, because we do need to make a decision around summer very soon. Fall, we have a little bit more time, but we need to start showing what scenarios could look like. But I need to tell you this, our special education kids have got to be a priority as we look to how we start school back up. And I've talked to the state superintendent about how important it is that special needs kids across Virginia have got to be near the front of the line as we're looking at how school starts back up. Now, that's still about safety for kids, safety for teachers, but distance learning, as we all well know, has some real impact and particular impact on special education kids. So we've got to figure out how we can get them back in school as safely as possible, as soon as possible.
And we greatly appreciate you advocating on behalf of our kids and our students to the higher levels in the state. So thank you for doing that. And also thank you in advance for inviting SEPTA board members to give you some feedback later this week about ESY plans. You had mentioned that you're making decisions about the summer. So I did want to say thank you and to share with people watching that SEPTA has been asked to share some feedback on potential ESY plans. Can you speak a little bit to what FCPS is planning for extended school year, and are you considering increasing hours, to switching to more intensive remediation instead of just review? Given that a lot of students with disabilities are going to need extra support, how are we going to look at who gets ESY this year?
You're trying to make SEPTA must-see TV instead of school board meetings. I'm trying to keep
engaging,
I'm trying to keep my day job and share with the school board before I'm sharing with SEPTA, formally at least. I would say broadly, one of the things we're trying to figure out is what can we still continue to do virtually, and what's a timeline for virtual, and then what are those things that there's no substitute for face-to-face, and when is it really going to be practical to be able to do it face-to-face. And I do want to make special education kids a priority, but I don't want to rush them back into a situation that parents in our community feels is not safe. So that's a very, very delicate, but just honest, transparent balance that we need to take. And I do want to hear from our special education parents and community. I think no matter what, there's going to be some parents, special ed, gen ed, no matter what, they're going to want a chance to stay virtual for a while. And I think we've got to be thinking about that. And we are already, that some folks are just not going to be ready in August and maybe even later in the year. And we've got to figure out how we can respect that as one of the options. And then for special ed parents, how do we do that longer term in a way that really gets back to meeting all those IEP goals and all those requirements?
So it sounds like in that case, there's certainly a very strong potential for ESY to be virtual. I'm hoping not. There a possibility that ESY would not happen?
I don't know, Teresa, not happen at all?
That has not been part of our discussion at this point. I think we're looking for how can we make it happen. And whether we traditionally ESYs really looked, IEP teams have to decide whether the benefits the child gained during the regular school year will be significantly jeopardized if the student doesn't receive those services. So some of that, we've been receiving some different feedback nationally about whether you just look at what's before the closure, but I think we're going to have to make that decision on a case-by-case basis. But the conversation at this point has not been nothing.
So Michelle, I want to say something that actually this helps me sometimes doing this, is like getting ready for sharing next week.
Uh-oh.
Summer is not going to be the slingshot that that erases all gaps and loss from what we've just experienced.
Oh, yeah.
So we cannot have folks thinking summer is the double down to erase everything that has impacted kids academically, social, emotionally. We may be able to stop more of the slide, from happening, but it is not going to be a slingshot or a complete gap eraser. I don't care what we do this summer. We could have face-to-face for 12 hours a day, and what has happened to our kids and our families is not going to be fixed in July and August. So I want to say that to this group tonight, and no, we've got to start planning for the long haul of really what I think is going to be multiple months, potentially multiple years of how we get, I'm just being honest, to get kids.
I know.
Because it's still, when they come back, there's going to be anxieties to the world still will have changed. Yep. And people know me personally. I'm a big optimist, and I'm optimistic we can figure out how to provide that support for kids. But I'm not optimistic that a couple of months in the summer and a month or two of remediation and it's all going to be well. And I'm co-chair of an accreditation task force for the Commonwealth of Virginia to look at accreditation, which is waived for the spring, and to look at recommendations. And we've got to be embracing kids about where they are socially, emotionally, and not as test scores when they come back. The state superintendent has already agreed there's not going to be any SOL testing in the fall. And we really need to think about how we're doing testing of our kids as we move forward. We need to figure out where their gaps are academically and socially, emotionally, and how we fill them, and not worried about how the scorecard is going to be for the school district and school districts around the Commonwealth. So that's some work we have to do. I appreciate being asked to be one of 3 co-chairs, and we're going to make sure our voices are heard around that issue.
That's a great honor for you to be jumping into, and I know I'm at least one who's cheering for no SOLs in the fall. So that's great.
No SOLs in the fall. No SOLs in the fall.
Excellent. I do want to jump over and not forget about our staff. We've been hearing a lot of feedback from staff, and I hope that tonight has cleared up some confusion between miscommunications of information getting handed down to our staff and to our parents. As we mentioned a little bit earlier, the staff are working incredibly long days, and then many of them are supervising and trying to support their own kids' learning. And I, as a former teacher, don't know how they're doing it, and appreciate that tremendously. But at the same time, I'm concerned about them and all the extra everything that they're putting in right now. There are potentially teachers who don't have internet access at home. You mentioned about distributing the MiFis. Are those being distributed to teachers as well if they need them?
So we've tried to work hard with teachers who have technology concerns, and if you're hearing something, please let us know. We've tried to really support teachers in teleworking. I know one topic that's come up is like special ed instructional assistants to get laptops. So we are talking to schools about providing some laptops. We don't have enough, to be honest, to have laptops for everybody, for every IA, but we are talking to schools about how to the computers we have left are computers that were designed for kids, not faculty. How can we redesign them quickly and make them faculty ready and give some more out? So we are in the middle of talking about that, and we hope to have some more out this month to IAs, particularly special education IAs, as they need them.
And they are incredible people. So I hope that that's able to get moved forward. How is FCPS monitoring and getting feedback on the working conditions and mental well-being of teachers and staff?
So Michelle, can I follow up on what Dr. Brabrand just mentioned? We are concerned about our teachers. We just had a conversation at our leadership level about providing social emotional supports to our own teachers and staff during this challenging time, because some are feeling it more heavily than others for various family circumstances. Some of them are very new to technology and trying to teach online and providing instruction in a very different environment, in addition to for their, working with their own families and illnesses within their families. We
Yep.
do encourage, if these teachers, we really need to hear about them so that we can help support them. If they're working these kinds of long hours, we do have support at the level, our curriculum resource teachers, our behavior intervention teachers, to help work with them on whether it's materials or what is it that we can help them with their TLPs. So please, I'm asking any teachers that are on here that need that level of support, they really need to reach out to us, because we are worried. And our case managers are the ones that are calling families and hearing some heartbreaking stories that are just causing some secondary trauma that we need to address. Some children don't even have basic needs that can be met, and our teachers are feeling the burden of that. So I just want to say that before talking about the monitoring. Dr. Brabrand may want to jump in, but we are monitoring feedback from principals. Principals did a really good job in LT today advocating for their teachers, listening to central office staff that are reaching out to families and working directly with school-based staff. We're reviewing the client communications that are coming in to all of our offices and our various departments we really received through the online client communication. I'm getting feedback from our ombudsman's office, and hearing from our teachers associations has been just very helpful, I'll say. So I don't know if Dr. Brabrand wants to add to that.
Good. And I'm glad you mentioned the ombudsman.
I do want to say, and I know we're coming up on the hour, that our teachers are the best in the United States. I'm so blessed to be able to lead a system with so many amazing teachers and support staff. And one of the things we put out today, or earlier this week, I guess yesterday, was really reach out to a teacher, to a counselor, psychologist, social worker, OT, PT, case manager. Tell them the impact that you've had. Right now, all of us, we all have to admit that we have all experienced trauma in this last month. Every person who's being honest with themselves has experienced trauma. I know I feel that way, and I'm superintendent of the school system. So we've got to give people permission to feel, which was the our guest speaker this fall in Teresa's wonderful conference. I know I should remember his name, Teresa. What's Dr.
Mark Brackett.
Dr. Brackett. We need to have a big moment in Fairfax County Public Schools and our community to give ourselves permission to feel sad, angry, isolated, upset. And then we need to give permission to also celebrate each other, talk about the positives, hold leadership accountable for what needs to get better, but also talk about what's going right. We've struggled a little bit at the very beginning. We've had 2 great weeks of face-to-face learning, long overdue to some, I know, but we are on the right track. And our focus now is on getting ready to continue that work for the summer and the fall. And we want everybody to be proud of Fairfax County Public Schools, and more importantly, proud of the education their kids getting. And we have great people who are making that happen. And but wellness is important. And I'll tell you, Teresa asked staff to reach out, but if you feel like there's a staff member you're concerned about, please let us know, because we don't want a child or a staff member suffering in silence out there. And we can connect people even during this time of being in this distance learning or social distancing. We have to stay tied and connected together.
Yep, and I know many parents just as much are feeling that trauma. Like you said, I think we all are. So I think it's an important reminder for us as parents, for our staff members, to ask for help. I appreciate that you've given us time. I have one more question, if you don't mind waiting for the last one.
Absolutely.
I didn't want to overlook our kiddos who have 504 plans. Who don't have IEPs, but they have disabilities that are addressed through 504 plans. Those parents have expressed concern that their students have been left out of a lot of the conversation around distance learning. Since those kids are not followed by a special ed case manager or by DSS, how can parents make accommodations and ensure that those accommodations from the 504 plans are getting implemented in distance learning? Whose job is it to ensure all that compliance?
Well, the teacher is definitely responsible. They've had that child all year and should be well aware of the accommodations that the child requires and what needs to be implemented in the distance learning environment. But in most cases, the child's counselor serves as the 504 case manager, and specific guidance and reminders have been shared with case managers regarding the importance of reviewing each child's accommodations and services, and that's been sent out. And there are resources online and additional information on our website, on our intranet for school personnel, including the counselor. So they should be reaching out to the teachers to ensure, again, that the 504 plans, what's feasible to implement during the distance learning is following. If the parent wishes to discuss their child's 504 plan at this time, they need to contact the counselor. Otherwise, the counselor should be following up similar to IEP meetings if a 504 plan is coming due or a reevaluation for 504 is coming due.
Okay, great. And I know that, and something I just want to thank my own kids' teachers for in terms of looking at that accommodation piece is being willing to be flexible. And I hope that it happens the case for other parents and other teachers as well, that teams are willing to think creatively and outside of the box, because when we can come up with accommodations that work for our kids in this situation, it makes a world of difference. So, thank you to everybody who's working hard on that. I can't believe we got through all of our questions.
Yeah, Michelle.
I know. So I did want to thank you for spending your evening with us tonight. Behind the scenes, we know we were doing it on our end for the past several days. The preparation for this program really took a considerable amount of time. And our hope is that tonight's session cleared up confusion and eased worry and frustration, and is going to hopefully get us all on the same page about distance learning work for our students. SEPTA is really looking forward to continuing to work with you to keep open our communication between parents and staff and administration. To everyone else who joined us this evening or is watching the recording from it, thank you for your time, for your input, for your advocacy, and for your support. Anger can really fuel action, and we've seen a lot of that, but it can also leave us feeling really emotionally exhausted and isolated. So my personal hope is that we continue to work together and that we're patient and that we presume competence with one another and just really take things one day at a time. So SEPTA is here for all of you. Visit our website or our Facebook pages to join us or extend any offers that you have to help us in our mission. And Dr. Brabrand or Ms. Johnson, if you have anything else that you want to add, I just want to say thank you so much again for all of the time and the help that you put into making this program happen.
Teresa, do you want to say anything?
I just want to let you know that I have decided to retire, and I will be retiring at the end of July. And I appreciate all the wonderful experiences I've had in FCPS, and my love and passion for special ed has taken me pretty far. And the opportunities I've had the last 3 years serving Fairfax County as the Assistant Superintendent for Special Services have been quite the learning experience, and certainly have provided me with a lot of knowledge and things that I will take into my new life in retirement.
Right. Teresa, you and I have known each other for many years, and
Yes,
this is now the second time I've had this bombshell dropped on me. Ms. Johnson was our school principal when my oldest was at Chantilly, and just as she got to be a great advocate for my kids, I found out she was moving and going on to this job. Oh, well, congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
Michelle, you said you wanted this to be must-see TV, right? I mean, so we had to have a big announcement at the end. I want to thank Teresa. I've known her for years. When I was a principal, she was the PSL for Fairfax High School. She was amazing. She was an amazing principal, and she's done an amazing job in one of the most difficult jobs, most demanding jobs in the entire country. And I want to thank you too, Michelle, for your leadership in bringing us here tonight. And you have been an advocate for all the folks that are behind you. You have had suffering, but you've continued to engage us and push us to be better. And I appreciate that. And I want to just leave you with, I continue as a leader to have an open mind and an open heart. and I ask for the same from the SEPTA community. And we're going to continue to partner. They're going to be great days. They're going to be not so great days, and they're going to be days in between. And I'm going to, as long as I'm asked to serve as superintendent, going to be a partner with this community, with SEPTA, to make things as good as they can be in Fairfax County. So thank you for having me tonight, and it was a wonderful program, and thank you for everything you've done to make this happen tonight so well. And thanks to Julie as well for providing all the ASL interpretation tonight. It really sends a message about what we're trying to do to be inclusive.
Absolutely. And thank you again for helping us with setting up the arrangements to have Julie joining us this evening. And I'm going to need to go take a breather after this. Teresa, thank you. I can't imagine having your job. And we appreciate the roller coaster ride that you've been riding along with us. So thank you. Everybody have a wonderful evening. We appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Julie. And thanks, Larry.